What have you got there, Jess? What have you got there? You got a bolly? Have you got a bolly? Hi everybody, yeah, it's that mug again. It hasn't been washed since the last video, I've got to be honest. It's been swirled out. Anyway, this video, oh, t-shirt, no coat, no top, no nothing. So, lovely weather down here in Gloucestershire at the moment, bloody gorgeous. Just shame we're all on shutdown really. So, to try and look on the bright side, we can get on with stuff while we're home. Negative side is, one of my reasons for doing this project at this time of the year is because when I'm doing the noisy bits like welding, grinding, sandblasting, that sort of stuff, then my neighbours would be at work. I purposely don't do this on weekends. Unfortunately now all my neighbours are at home and they're all with the patio doors open and sat outside and lovely, and so they're all loving me at the moment, and I'm trying to restrict this to sort of, you know, not doing too much at a time, sort of 10 minutes on the blaster and then put it away, a few minutes with the grinder, put it away, but yeah, but you know, these things happen once in a lifetime. Anyway, this video is a follow-on from my Gwyn Lewis parts video that I got, and as you know, the main part of that that order was the bits and pieces for the axles, which I'm glad I've got because it gives me something to be getting on with while all this is going on. Unfortunately, I don't want to be ordering seals and stuff for the axles now, because if the place is shut down for 3 months or whatever, the order might get lost or whatever, so a little bit dubious about that. If anyone works for a Land Rover parts supplier, they're watching this now and they can guarantee they'll get stuff to me, please drop me a line in the comments below, because I need to order all my front axle seals and everything. So this video is all about preparing for welding one of these humongous diff covers on. So we're going to talk about what we need to do to prepare for it, what we need to do to make sure we're kind of ready to cover distortion. As you know, I made those frames to sit the axle in, which is going to prove dead handy, I think. I don't think this video is going to cover actually cutting the diff cover off or doing any welding or anything. It's just going to cover what we need to do to get ready. So let me start by showing you a little thing I've come up with, a little tool I've made, just to basically clean up the studs for the diff. Mine were very rusty. They obviously had no rust protection whatsoever, so they've been sat in there with no real oil leaks dripping on them other than a weepy rear diff oil seal. They were very rusty and very, very crusty, and it took a lot to clean them up. One of them actually snapped off. I think it was probably overtimed. As soon as I undid the nut, it just broke, just banged straight off, and that was off the rear axle, which had had some lubrication from the oil leak. So I think that had probably been over tightened. But where is it? It's here somewhere. You can see the stud is basically snapped off right at its base. So yeah, I think it had been over tightened. I don't know. So the first thing I'll do is show how to clean those threads up and what I've done to get around it. So here we go. This is the front axle actually sat there in its frame. And as you can see, one of the issues with actually doing these studs, they're 3/8 UNF, and there's 10 of them I think. You can't get a die wrench around there because you don't have the swing. You don't have the swing between the studs. You could use a die nut and a socket. I don't have a die nut and I can't go out and get one because all the shops are closed. So I've actually come up with something to get around it, and I'll show you it now on the bench. There's the diff ready to come apart. So here's my die, okay, and obviously the two handles would go in here where these two bolts are. So I took the handles out, got a couple of 3/8 UNC, I made this years ago, got a couple of 3/8 UNC bolts and put them in there. Piece of steel plate. I've welded a scabby old nut onto the piece of steel plate here, and then welded the plate to the two bolts. So now I'm able to drive that down with the nut, and I haven't ruined my die block. Once I finish with this, I can just cut through that weld there, snap it off, throw that away, throw the bolts away, and then put the handles back in, and my die wrench is back as good as gold. Now on some of them they weren't that bad, and you could actually use this to wind them on by hand. I'll just show you how this goes. So you can basically put it on like so, get it square, and then you can sort of wind it on by hand. Be careful not to trap your fingers in here, as I did. It really hurts. But these have all been done, so it's quite easy to go down like that. But if it's tight, put a socket on there, wind it down with a ratchet, and then wind it back off with your hand. And then I've got an ordinary 3/8 UNF nut just to test the threads. But you can see how some of them, like for instance this one here, you see how it's quite bright all the way down. Get the camera re-angled. It's quite bright, so you can see there was a lot that, you know, that cleaned up on there. There's no real swarf has come off, it's only rust and powder and dust that's come off. So I've got the rear axle over there to do yet, and as you can see there's the missing one there where I've actually tapped it out. They actually tap in, they're like wheel studs. They're probably 3/8 wheel studs off of, remember the old Minis used to have 3/8 UNF studs, didn't they? So so there we go. The other thing I need to do is strip a diff, because I want to clamp a diff to the axle to limit distortion. So this is the rear diff. Now this diff had a leaky seal on its nose. Be careful not to go off camera, I'm good at that. So well, yeah, this diff had a leaky seal on its nose, so I pulled the flange off. Now unfortunately Land Rover have done the same with these axles as they did on the transfer box, and they've literally plastered the shaft in bearing fit. So when you pull it off, the bits of rubbish from the bearing fit, I don't know if I can get the camera there to show you, but basically, now you can't see it, I don't think you can see it, I'll show you when I take it apart, but basically those bits of hard crystallised bearing fit will go down into the bearing. Great, thanks for that. So I've now got to strip the diff anyway to clean the bearing out, and you can't pull the bearing over the shaft because you've got bearing fit all over the end of the shaft. So I'm going to have to tap that through, heat it up, tap it through, whatever. But we'll do all that when we strip the diff. But I want to strip the diff and use the empty casing, and obviously cover the bearings up and everything, bolt it to the axle, and that'll help hold the axle in position when we start welding the diff cover on, because we don't want to start distorting the axle. So that's one thing. The other thing we need to do is with the axles, when we actually weld the diff, we need to make sure we don't pull the axle. Now, I suppose the best way to show you this, if I tip this over, when we weld here, okay, the weld will shrink and it will pull, and eventually, if I can exaggerate it, the axle will go that shape. Let's bring the camera back. The axle will take on that shape, okay? So what we need to do is obviously bolt the diff on there to help clamp it, and then the way to check the axle hasn't bent is to put a couple of parallel bars on these end flanges and then measure. And then what you can do then is, if it has bent, you can run beads of weld down here and here to pull it back. It probably won't bend here, but it may well bend here. So then what you do is do that to pull it back. Now, the other thing we need to do is make sure that this flange, this face here, is parallel to the centre line, because obviously what you could do is pull it like that sort of thing, like that. So we need to make sure that remains parallel, and we'll come to that later. So, so yeah, that's something we need to do. So I'll show how I've got around that. What I've done, I've made these two bars, there's two here. I'll show you one of them. What I've done is drilled these out. Now you can see this one is marked with two centre punch marks. Where are we going? Here. Okay, there you go. See two. So that shows me that this is for the left hand side. And then I basically tack welded some washers on, because what I did, I realised that you could actually use the same two holes on the rear axle if you elongated one of the holes. But the trouble is with that, then it's not in the right plane, it's not down the centre of the axle. So what I've done is drilled another hole here, and I've welded washers on just so you don't put them on the wrong way around. They will only fit one way now. So these two holes here are for the front axle, and these two holes here are for the rear. So what you do is bolt them to the flanges, and then measure from bar to bar like this across to the other one. I'll show you when we get there. And then that will make sure that our axles are all nice and parallel. We're getting this, I don't know where we're getting that, it's from the LED lights, I'm sorry. Sorry, fluorescent lights, not the LEDs. So there we go, that's those two made. And that's basically pretty much it really. But the only other thing we need to do is to make sure, we need to make sure that we've got our diff marked up. Now, where are we here? Now, as you know, on the rear end I mark everything 1 and 2, and on the front end I mark everything with 1 spot and 2 spots, left and right. And what I've done here, if you can see it, if you tip it over, you can see there we've got a 1 and a 1, so they'll line up when it's reassembled. And then we've got a 1 there, okay, because if I put the same bearings back in, it should all go back to the same position because everything else is fine. And over here we got, you can see we've got a 2 and a 2 there, and then we've got a 2 here. Where are we? Got a 2 here, and that shows you that that's where that pin goes, and that's the right hand side. So that basically covers all that. So once you've done that, then you can strip it down, and you know you've got no worries about anything going back not in the right place. The only thing we've got to worry about is make sure that we keep the outer bearing races side to side. So we can, what we can do is when we take it apart, we can cable tie this nut to the outer bearing race, and then we know that we've got them side by side then. So let's get the camera on the bench properly and we'll strip the diff down. Okay, so to slacken these nuts off, I've had to put the bolt, should I say, I've had to put the diff in a vise because there's no way I can hold it on the bench. So just put it in the vise and make sure you support it and stand well back in case it jumps out. It won't be good for your diff to fall on the floor, but it'd be a lot worse for your leg. So I always wear steel caps in the garage, just in case. But, so there we go. They're actually not that tight, it's just awkward to hold. I was thinking about putting a bar through the diff, but I thought I might damage the spline. So we can get back on the bench now and get it apart. Now, I always thought these bolts were supposed to be thread locked. As you can see, I've cracked them off in the vise, and they just literally undo with my fingers. Now, I'm not sure that's right. When they go back in, I think I'll thread lock them. I've got a soft face mallet here. I'm just going to give these caps a tap just to release them. Okay, so they've yeah, there's no thread lock on them at all, look. Nothing whatsoever. So, a bit weird. I'll have to check in a manual. I'm not sure if these can be reused. I think they can. God, it stinks. Let's just pop that cap off of there. Making sure we don't damage the dowels. Check in there and everything's good. Nothing's been spinning, so that all looks good. And on this side, believe it or not, I've never stripped a Land Rover diff before. I've stripped a million diffs in my time, but I've never stripped a Land Rover one. Actually, a million's probably an exaggeration. A paper towel. Again, paper towel's great for stripping down, but be very careful when you're rebuilding because this happens. You won't do it now, will it? What happens is you get little bits of paper come off. There we go, like this. Okay, so a bit of paper there, little bits of paper come off. They get into places and you don't really want it in there. So be very, very careful. Okay, just give this one a wipe. As you can see, one dowel's come out in that one and they've both come out in this one. Well, this one's almost out, so just tap that one back in. I'm not sure if they're supposed to stay in the diff housing or if they're supposed to be in the caps. I'll check that out. So now what we can do is literally just lift this out and this should just pop out. Okay, it should just pop out. If I turn it. It doesn't want to come out. I'm going to have to make a tool for this as well. I think it's going to come out all of a sudden. Wow. turn the camera off and get this done because this may be a little boring for you guys. Okay, so what I've done is used a brass punch and just literally just tap those out using a brass punch so they don't get any damage on them. And looking at the back of here, I don't like to look at these black deposits everywhere, which concerns me. The front diff was all like it as well. I thought that was just because of the see how this paper towel just falls apart? I thought that was just because the CV grease was getting in there. So that's those apart now. So now this should just lift out. There we go. So it was actually we'll put those with their relevant nuts, and then we can look at everything on the bench. We can see here that these bearings look absolutely fine. The races, they look absolutely fine. There's a little bit of scoring in there. We'll see how much they are. If they're not too expensive, I'll replace them. You can see there where the cap's been pinching it. And there we go. Yeah, that one's got a little bit of debris gone around in it, but I'll probably replace them anyway. So we should now be able to just pull this pinion out, but unfortunately, camera in to show you this. Okay, I'll try and do this handheld, but it is very awkward. So I'm pulling the pinion up, and you can probably see down on the bottom of that spline all that crap from the bearing lock, the bearing fit. So now that won't go back through the bearing because it's all built up around the bottom, and all the rest of it's all gone into the bearing. So that's why I'm having to clean this out. So I might be able to just tap that through the bearing. I may have to heat it up, we'll see, but I'll let you know when I've done it. And there we go, guys. That is the diff basically stripped with the bearings. Obviously, the bearing races for the pinion are left in. We've got the rear pinion bearing there, and the front pinion bearing is up here inside. Here is the pinion with the bearings, which you've probably all seen before. I'm surprised to see it's got Dana on here. Is it Danat or Dana T? Is this Dana the American diff company? You can see it on there. Look, we get the light to show it. See it, Dana T. So yeah, I thought Danas were on Jeeps. Never mind. So there we go. So that's that part there. We've got genuine Timken bearings in there, which is good. So genuine Timken from the factory, which is a nice touch. That would be a bit of a swine to change by the look of it, but it looks like it doesn't need changing. There is some very, where are we? I don't know if you can pick it up in the light. There's some very, very light scoring on there. It's had something going round, but we'll have a look when it's all cleaned up. Don't forget to do that, guys. Tie your bearing outer race to your nut so you know exactly what you're looking at. And you're keeping them side to side. Keep any oil mopped up. You don't want it, avoid it getting on your clothes. It'll be a help, because otherwise you'll stink the house out, and your missus or your partner or whatever will be really pleased with you. And here basically is what a really good condition as new diff looks like inside. You can see it's all lovely and clean and shiny. So whether this is going back in or not, I don't know. I doubt it. I'm tempted to put a locker in there just because I want the joy of fitting all the pipework and everything. So anyway, so that's that for the diff. Next thing I'm going to do, just to finish this video off, I'm going to show you about prepping up the diff cover for welding and using these two bars that I made to check the axle is parallel. Okay, just a couple of little workshop tips, guys. Number one is be very, very careful. All these edges here, none of them are deburred. They are all extremely sharp, and some have a burr on them. So, you know, this corner here, for instance, I could easily just cut my finger open on there. It's really sharp. There's burrs all around the holes. It all needs to be deburred and polished back. Obviously you need to be careful when deburring the corners of the threads there. But yeah, be careful if you're sticking your hand up into to pull the shaft up or something. You catch your wrist on there. That is really going to cut big time. That is really sharp. So yeah, be aware of that. And also on this pinion, I forgot to mention when I showed you earlier, there's actually a shim here. So basically, you don't have a crush washer, which I love. You have a shim, which is how it should be done properly. So basically, when you rebuild the axle, we'll do the same again as we did before. We'll shim this out, check the end float, and then take the shims away to give us a 2 thou preload, or whatever the preload's supposed to be. It should be probably about 2 thou. So I know when I did my Jeep axles, it's done by measuring the torque it takes to turn it, but you just do it until it sort of feels tight-ish, not tight-ish, but it's just got a bit of drag. So when you spin it, it doesn't just spin; it just stops. You know, that's how you really want it. But I'll use the shimming method and get 2, 3, 4 thou preload. So one other workshop tip I'm going to show you is here. Now, you've probably seen me many times in my other builds are using cardboard on the bench. This is why. Now this bench, as you know, I've been grinding on and welding, and I came along with a vacuum. I vacuumed it off. I wiped it off with a cloth. Here's a cloth with oil on it. There you go. So it's got some absorbency. I'll wipe this area here, wipe that thoroughly. Okay, listen. Hear that, the grating? That's stuff on the bench. You can see there, even though I've just wiped it off, you can see it's picked all that up. So, you know, you need to be careful about cleanliness, and when you're building stuff, always build it on a clean sheet of cardboard or something if you're using your workshop for welding and grinding and all sorts of stuff. So there we go, tip over. Okay, so second thoughts. Looking at these bearings, I think I may well be replacing them because they are a little scored and a little dark as well. So don't quite know why. For what they cost, it's worth just replacing them while it's apart. So what I'm going to do is measure the height of the pinion now, and this is basically what I'm measuring here. Is I'll pick the camera up. What I'm doing is measuring from this face here, all these 4 faces, down to here, and then take an average. Well, I'll go across here, I'll go across here, and then take an average. And then when I put the bearings back in, there's a shim under this bearing, so you can set the height of the pinion so you get the correct mesh. And if you put it back as it is now, it's going to be fine, because everything at the moment is fine. It's fine. The backlash is fine, the mesh is fine, everything's good. So I've got a nice pattern and everything. So get ourselves a reference of where we are now, work from there, and then we know we're in the right ballpark. So let's just do the measurement. So what I'm going to do is show you how I do this. Now, you can do this with an ordinary digital caliper, but because of the nature of them, they can be a bit wonky and give you inaccuracy. So they're okay as long as you do the measurement about 3 or 5 times and take an average. What you really want is a depth gauge. Now, here's an old, very old imperial depth gauge with a vernier scale on it. So if you've never seen one of these, you know, it needs to be, you need to learn how to use them if you've got one, because they are absolutely, they're foolproof. As long as it's 0, as long as you set it 0, it's foolproof, it can't go wrong. So I've got the diff actually sat up on a piece of metal here, so because otherwise the nose of the pinion sits on the bench. So make sure your pinion can spin freely and it's sat in there and down on the bearings and there's no crap in there. So first thing I do is put the parallel bar on, and then I'm going to measure down using the vernier, using the depth gauge. I can measure down to see how thick the bar is, and I can see that that is 5, use a glass, that is 593. So write that on the bench, and then I'll measure the other end. And that is 594, so just over, so we'll say it's 594 is the thickness of that. Okay, in fact we can check that with our, it's in metric still. Now this thing I don't really trust, but it's saying there 590, as you can see there, 590, but I don't know, I don't trust that. I'd much rather trust a vernier, because the thing is with digital equipment, it can mislead you. This can, it's mechanical, it can't go wrong really if you use it properly. So that is 590, yeah, 594. So we'll say that's 594 thick. So whatever dimension we get here, we've got to subtract 594 from it, and then we'll have the dimension from here down to the inside. So push that down, make sure it's nice and settled on there. Make sure you're not going down onto any writing or anything, because if it's been engraved on, it may be raised. So make sure you're on the flat metal surface, lock it, take it out, and we can have a look at this and we can see that this is 3.503. 3.503, and then I'm going to check across these two. And that is 3.503. So 3.503 minus 594. So 3 minus 4 you can't do, so it's nothing. So it's 4, carry the 1, that becomes 9. So it's 13 minus 4 is 9. And then we've got 9 minus 9 is nothing. 4 minus 5 you can't do, so that's a 2, carry the 1. So that's 14 minus 5 is 9, so that's 2.909 inches. Okay, so we now know the depth from there down to there is 2.909 inches. Now I'll show you how you can do this with a digital caliper. What you can do is come along here, let's put it back on metric, come along here, set your 0, you can't see me can you, measuring the thickness there, set your 0. You see why I can't trust this thing, it's 30 microns out there, so this is an accurate caliper gauge, that's why I can't trust it. But it's okay, as I've said before, it's okay for like checking lengths of bolts, diameters of bolts and stuff, but accurate stuff like this, no good. But if you have a good one, you can do this. Okay, so now you've set that at 0. Okay, so now what you can do is, instead of doing it this way, make sure you can see what I'm doing, instead of doing it this way, like this, where it's all wonky and wobbly and you could be all over the place, what you do is pull this part out and hold it against the side of the parallel bar. Okay, now I can pivot it that way, but I can't pivot it that way. And then drop it down and make sure it's sat on there, and then you can literally just push this down until it stops on the back. Okay, so you can see we've got there 74.04. Now this is going to show you where the inaccuracy comes in. So do exactly the same again. Okay, it's on the parallel bar. Push that down. 74.01. Come across here. .08. So it's a good way of doing it if you've got a decent caliper. If you really want to be accurate, I think this is the only way to go as a vernier. Digital stuff is okay, but it can lie to you, because it can. I mean, if I go back and check this bar now, it's gone to 0 because the camera's on. If the camera wasn't on, there we go. You can see there's 60 microns out. So if the camera wasn't on, it would play up even more. So I've got 2.909, and what do we measure this as? 74. So if we convert it, I know that 73.9, because I've done this before I filmed it, 73.91, which is what I got before, equals 2.909, and this is telling me, sorry, it's 2.910, and this is telling me it's 2.909. I'm going to trust this, it's 2.909. Okay, so there we go. And as I say, all this is a reference point to get us started, so that when we put it back together, we put this in the same place in relation to these, and then we check our pattern and everything, and then we raise or lower the pinion to get the pattern correct. Alright, so you can see now I've got these bars bolted onto the axle. As you can see, they're in an upward slope because I want them parallel to the axle is made in two halves, and I want them basically perpendicular, if you like, to the diff face. So as you can see here, the diff is facing up, and so these are facing up, so they're perpendicular. Then if I get any bend, it's actually in that plane, I can see it. So to measure across here now, I've got 1151. Measure across here, I've got 1148. So it's already like that. So basically welding it is only going to make it worse. So I need to basically weld it, tweak it, whatever, and then to get it back straight, what I'll do is weld down here. The thing is, with the front axle, it's not as important as on the back, because obviously you've got swivels on the end, but what you want to try and get it as good as you possibly can. Rear axle, I think, needs to be absolutely precise. I've just gone and done a calculation, guys, measuring this. Basically you've got 3mm difference end to end, and these bars are 1.2 meters long. So basically the axle is angled like this by 0.1 degrees. Yeah, don't think we'll worry about that too much. Okay, so finally we look at the preparation of the actual diff pan itself before we weld it on. Now, this is the first thing to note. I've put one of my old drain plugs in. I'm not using one of the new magnetic ones, obviously that would be stupid. I've put one of the old drain plugs in there, and I've done it up as tight as I can do it with a short bar to make sure it's in there, get as much thread as covered as I can. And basically you want to make sure that you do this because you don't want weld spatter getting on that thread, especially if you don't have a 3/4 BSPT tap. I think I may have one, but even so, if you do get a proper bit of weld spatter that's really stuck in there, it could just chip your tap if it's really in there. It's better to just do this from the start. Don't trust anti-spatter spray or whatever, just do this from the start. And then when I come to do weld the inside, what I will probably do is get the other plug and turn it down. In fact, let's see. I don't think it will go in there. Yes, it will. So we can put the other one in from the other side. In fact, what we could do is leave this one raised on the outside and screw that one in deeper, because then we can we'll have more room on the inside. But you want to get this done before you do anything else, because the last thing you want to do is start welding and stuff around that thread and get spatter in there, because that will ruin your day. Especially if you've got it all on there painted and everything, and then you discover it. So you know, it's best to, and as I say, these are old plugs that I'm not going to use anymore, so I don't mind if they get damaged. So I'm going to screw that one in there. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm going to screw this one out and screw this one in, because basically, there we go, that's in there now. Right, so now I know I'm not going to get any thread weld in that, weld spatter in that bar, and I can just tighten this one up. This is so much easier when the camera's not on. Just tighten that one up like that, and there we go. Now if I'm really worried about spatter getting on there, I can wrap something around there or whatever, but basically that's the first thing you want to do. Make sure that's protected. If you do get weld spatter on here, not an issue, you're not going to be using it again. So, because you get a new sump plug with this anyway, a new drain plug, filler plug, whatever. So now we can look at this and we can see that obviously to prevent corrosion, Gwyn Lewis covers this in oil. I'm going to make sure this is absolutely spotlessly clean before I start welding, because if you got oil down in here, you'll start to get porosity and all sorts of issues with your welds. The other thing I'm going to do is grind these tacks down. Now what I might do is put a good heavy tack in the inside of each corner, so two there and a couple there, just to make sure it doesn't fall apart. But but going to grind those tacks down to pretty much nothing so that when I weld I don't end up with a lump there. Not really important because I'm going to be grinding all this flush anyway, so it looks like one piece. But you basically, if you leave these tacks in, you've got a start and stop place. So you know, it's better to make your own start and stop than rely on some, you know, a cold slug in there. If there's some imperfections or whatever in there, then you know you're going to run into them. So I'm going to clean this off, get it all degreased. Before I actually weld it, I'll put some brake cleaner in there, let that all dry out. But for now, I'm going to wash it in paraffin, grind all these tacks down, and then we'll go from there. But for this video, that's it. Basically, I'm going to, as I say, get this ready to weld up. Next video, I'll be welding this up on the outside first and the inside, polishing up the outside, and getting it all looking pretty. So I'll see you then for the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.